Hello, and welcome to the Brutal Iron Gym podcast, where our goal is to cut through the BS and deliver the brutal truth about topics related to health and happiness. Today's podcast number 2005. The topic is Q&A, and the title is Nutrition Facts Labels, Understanding and Usage. Now, in today's podcast, we're going to be talking about the labels that you would see in America. However, the information discussed in regards to how to manage calories, the macronutrients, vitamins and minerals, cholesterol, sodium, all that is going to be helpful for people of any location. But I do want to throw it out there right away that I am going to be talking about the structure and the label in America. Okay. Now, one of the trainers I'm working with is a business client, and I'm teaching him how to do nutrition coaching for his clients. This is going to help him increase the effectiveness of his training services, help him make more money, but it's also going to help his clients get a better depth of service. So rather than having to pay a trainer, then also paying for some kind of nutrition service, they can just pay one person and that makes it cheaper. And then it also makes that trainer, in my opinion, being a trainer who manages both the training and nutrition, I can't imagine. Well, I can imagine because I used to do it. But now I would never want to do training programming for clients, but not know what their nutrition is or not have some say in their nutrition, because training is absolutely useless without proper nutrition. Yep. There are small benefits for sure that you could get for training regardless of how you eat, but depending on how you eat, it really dictates whether the training is useful, whether it gets the outcome that the trainer and the client want. If the person is eating randomly or you don't even know how they're eating, you're absolutely wasting your time as a trainer. Absolutely. So you do want to know what your clients are doing nutritionally. If you have any kind of program that's for fat loss, but you don't know what they're doing with their calories, if they're in a proper deficit or too extreme of a deficit or no deficit at all, or it's all of the above randomly, depending on what day it is, then your program for fat loss isn't going to work. If you have a program to build muscle tissue, but they don't have consistent protein intake, the program doesn't make a damn bit of difference. It doesn't matter what the hell you do in the gym to tear your muscles apart if you don't have the nutrition to support building them back up and actually building them bigger than what they were beforehand. Same thing with strength, same thing with blood marker improvement. That's going to be very dependent on nutrition. So trainers who don't manage nutrition, I would encourage you to find some way to ensure that your clients are following some routine of nutrition, so there's some degree of consistency, some degree of accuracy to what they're doing specific to their goals. Whether that's you learning how to be a nutrition coach yourself, or encouraging them to use nutrition tracking apps and then making sure that the apps have decent recommendations. I have clients all the time send me questions about their apps. I think most apps, to be honest, are awful. I would like to make my own app. So one of the things I struggle with is the apps will give people specific numbers for calories, like 1,744 calories. Horrible. Absolutely stupid. Because no one's going to hit their calories on the exact singular number every single day. So if that client goes 10 calories over, they're going to feel like a loser. If they're too many calories under, they feel like they did great. But what if their goal is to grow? What if their goal is to build muscle? And they're actually in a deficit. And yes, you can build muscle in a deficit, but you have to have extremely consistent and appropriate protein. So it's unlikely that they're doing that if they're not even hitting calories correctly or in a consistent way. So it's just, to me, it doesn't work well. I think most apps need a lot of improvement, but having an app in your back pocket or using that in some way is absolutely infinitely better than not at all. Okay, with me getting past that, because I'm already a little bit on a rant, most of my clients do use apps after I just trash talked them, but the reason why is it gives them some consistency, and then I give them numbers. So I'll give them calorie ranges they should aim for. We're not going to use what the app says. We don't even worry about carbs versus fats unless it's a specific condition. I don't care what their percentage of carbs versus fats are. We actually do that conditionally throughout the day, not predetermined day by day. And then protein, again, we're going to go with a range. Typically, I give them a minimum because most people have trouble eating enough protein. But for some of my clients, they actually overeat protein for various reasons, so I have to give them a top end of that range as well. So calories has a range, protein has a range. We do not specify percentages of carbs and fats. It's not even necessary. And then I usually give a maximum to sugars, making sure they don't go over a certain amount of sugar per day. For most people, I would start at 100 grams or less and then get them down to 60 grams or less. And for most people, that's plenty restrictive enough to where they can still have some sugars in their day, a piece of fruit here or there, but they're not over consuming sugar, getting water retention, increased nutrient storage in moments post surplus at meal absorption, and blah blah blah. So that's how I structure my diets for most people. Is we have a calorie range, protein range, sugar maximum, and then we don't care about carbs and fats. That depends on the person's individual needs and depending on what they're doing at the time of the meal, or going to be doing after the time of the meal. But that's how we kind of track things through. If you want to learn more about how I manage it, you can listen to podcast 1232. That's an older podcast. You might not be able to find that on the podcast player you're on. You can go to our website, www.brutalirongym.com. You can go to the free nutrition page. The first link on the free nutrition page is a document titled Create Your Own Nutrition Program. And including in that document is a link to the podcast 1232, but also in that document it'll explain for you how to find the appropriate calorie range, protein range, and it'll talk about meal timing, which is important as well. So that's all for free. You can set up your own nutrition program actually online, and then people hire me to help with specific situations and questions, and then also for accountability if that helps, and other nuances, whether they're getting ready for competitions or events or shows or whatever it might be. So one of my clients right now is a model, and we're getting ready for a photo shoot. So whatever the event is, I'll help them navigate the small changes and nuances towards those types of goals. Now, when we look at nutrition fact labels, there's a lot on the label, and a good bit of it you don't really need, and that's usually the most confusing part for people is the percentages. So if you look at the American label, it will have percentages, and it's listed as like percentage of daily value. Don't worry about that. I'll talk a little bit more here in a second. But those percentages are very intimidating because people kind of don't really know exactly what to do with that. And they're actually highly inaccurate for most people. So the daily percentage value is based off of like a 2,000 calorie diet. It's stupid. Why did they do that? Absolutely dumb. I do have a master's in nutrition, so I know why they did it, but it's dumb. I think it caused way more confusion than benefit. So that's my opinion for whatever that's worth. But that's going to be something that can alleviate a lot of concern is if you just tell somebody don't worry about percentages, then they already have less to worry about in that label. And then a good bit in that label we don't really need to pay attention to for most individuals. However, there are individuals where specific situations are important, so therefore they are going to worry about certain things, but then they don't have to worry about other things. So it's a little bit of a trade-off here and there. So if we look at a label, it starts at the very top. There's a top section under the word nutrition facts. It says servings per container and serving size. Servings per container just lets you know if it's not a single item, like if it's not, say a can of soda or an energy drink. If you have a pop top can of soda, one serving size is the soda. So there are certain things we have where there's just like one serving per container, and they typically don't even list that. They just say serving size is the container, whether it's one can, one box, one whatever. But that's the top section is servings per container and then serving size. This is helpful if you're trying to figure out and I'm going to give you specific questions to figure out and kind of what to do with these information here in a second. So I guess I'll wait for that. Okay, so servings per container and serving size. It'll tell us that. The next section is the calories, grams of fat, carbs, protein, that kind of stuff. But that is the amount per serving. So if you eat an entire container, what you see in that middle section isn't representative of the entire container sometimes. If there's multiple servings in the container, they're showing you the values for a single serving. So if you ate the entire container, but there's 2 servings per container, you have to multiply those numbers by 2. Now, for most of my clients, we don't actually have to do any of this math because they're using a nutrition app. They would just say, hey, I had this food item, I had this much of it, and then the app calculates all this for them per the serving that they had, not the serving size of the container, and then you have to figure anything out. The app kind of does that for you. Now, it's still helpful to know how to manage these labels because sometimes you don't have the app on hand, but you might know, hey, my typical meals, between 400 and 600 calories, or between, say, 600 to 800 calories. So if I'm trying to figure out a meal right now, I can just look at the labels and say, oh, okay, if I have 2 servings of this, that'll give me the protein I need. Then I'll still need 300 calories. So I can pair that with this food item at this amount will give me 300 calories. So it's still helpful to understand how to read labels because you can put together a meal. And that's very helpful to know how to do on the fly, so that way you can be more accurate towards your daily targets by knowing how to manipulate and create a meal in the moment. So the amount per serving section, it'll tell you the calories. So the calories per serving, it tells you total fat. Now, under the fat section, it lists saturated fat and trans fats. If there is a difference between the total there and the total amount of fat, the unspoken source is unsaturated fats. So say there's total fat is 10 grams, there's 5 grams of saturated fat and 0 grams of trans fat. Well, that doesn't add up to 10, right? So the difference is the unsaturated fats. The reason why they list saturated fat and trans fats is saturated fat should be controlled and limited to about 1/3 of your total fat intake per day. It is helpful for hormones, and there are benefits of saturated fats. It's just you don't want to have too much of them because that can start to run into heart and health issues. So saturated fats are listed because they're something you want to be aware of. And then trans fats are not good for you at all. You try to minimize those completely as much as possible. So they're listed so that way you're aware of that as well. Then we have cholesterol. This is helpful if anybody has any cholesterol issues. That way you can understand if the food item you're having has cholesterol in it, and if so, how much. And then sodium, same thing. If you have a sodium issue or sodium-related concern, then you can understand how much sodium is in your item there. And then we have total carbohydrates. Under the carbohydrates section is fiber, so you can understand fiber. Total sugars, and then there's also a section for any included sugars, such as sugar alcohols. And then we have protein. That kind of brings up the last of that middle section. Then the bottom section is vitamins and minerals. It tells you about the vitamins and minerals that are kind of common with that food item. And then again, off to the right, it'll give you those percentages. You don't have to worry too much about those, and I'll explain why in a second, but they're helpful in some way. So the percentage values for macronutrients is totally useless. You do not need to specify a certain percentage of carbs, a certain percentage of fats, and a certain percentage of protein, and most people aren't following exactly a 2,000 calorie goal for their diet. So that's why I think those percentages are useless. They shouldn't even have listed them for fats, carbs, and protein, because that's individual dependent, and it's not a good reference for the majority of people. So why even put it there? Cholesterol and sodium can be helpful because that's in relation to normal kind of FDA regulations. So that way you have an idea of, is this food, if I'm eating this food and it's 70% of my daily sodium, holy crap, that's a lot of sodium in there. So even if you have a higher allowance of sodium, say you're an athlete, you have more muscle tissue, you work out vigorously, your sodium needs are going to be higher, so it's not as much of a concern for you. But maybe you have blood pressure issues and you're sodium sensitive, then absolutely you're going to want to be aware of sodium. Same thing with cholesterol. If you have any cholesterol issues, one of the ways to work to reduce cholesterol is to just eat less of it. So that's helpful to know. If something has a high percentage of cholesterol, it tells you that it's likely high in cholesterol, and that can be an indicator to maybe find a different food source that's lower in cholesterol, if that's a concern for you. And then vitamins and minerals, same thing, is you can use it as a reference, but for most people, and for myself, I just take a multivitamin and mineral supplement per day. And then I don't really worry too much about what comes from my foods. So I'm not trying to figure out, did I have 100% of potassium today between this food item and that food item and this food item? I don't worry about that. Just take the multivitamin and you're good to go. No worries. Now, some people will get more detailed into that stuff because maybe they have a special situation. And if so, great. Definitely get as detailed as you need for health. But if you don't have a special situational need for vitamins and minerals, if you don't have a special deficiency or an alert, if you go too high in something specific, then you're not going to need to worry about that much. So how I use a label kind of depends on if I've already eaten the food or am I planning to eat it. If I've already eaten the food, I will say, okay, well, how many servings did I eat? So it's helpful to know the servings per container because maybe I ate the entire container, then I find out there's 3 servings per container, and I'm like, oh crap, okay. So that tells me what to do with the next bit of information. But that's the first question, is how many servings did I eat? Then, how many calories were in that many servings? So if I had a food item that had 3 servings per container, but I had the entire container, and then I find out it had 200 calories per serving, that means I had 600 calories. If there's 200 calories per serving, there's 3 servings per container, and I had the entire container, that means I had 3 servings of 200 calories, so I had 600 calories in total. Then I'll also do the same thing for protein, how much protein was in the amount of servings I had, and then how much sugar. Since those are the things that I track per day, and what most of my clients track is calories, protein, and sugars, that's what we want to figure out. Okay, if I've already eaten it, how many servings did I have? And then in the servings that I had, how many calories, protein, and sugar was in that? I then adjust my remaining calories and protein for the day accordingly. So maybe I had a really low protein lunch. I need to know that so that way I can aim for a high protein rich snack and maybe a high protein dinner to maybe catch up on that. Maybe I had a really high calorie lunch. Maybe I went out to eat with some friends. We had some Mexican food and I had some, queso and guacamole and a dip. And then I need to figure that out, know where my calories are, and then I find out, holy crap, I have 12 calories for dinner. So it's helpful to know so that way you can adjust what you have for the rest of the day so you can understand what to do at those meals. It's good to have an idea of what's going on throughout the day so that way you don't end the day and say, oh, holy crap, I ended up X number of calories over or a significant number of calories under, or my protein was way off. So too often I'll have people, they'll track their numbers, and I actually look into it every week for my clients. And I'm like, dude, you were low on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. I'm like, what the hell's going on? And they're like, yeah, I plugged the numbers in and I realized I was low. And I'm like, well, why did you plug the numbers in after the fact? Plug the numbers in the middle of the day, or pay attention to, what I teach clients is breaking our day into 3 sections. I call them time blocks. We want to break our day into 3 6-hour sections because typically we sleep 6 to 8 hours, which means we're awake for 16 to 18 hours. You can divide that by, say, 6 hours. So the first 6 hours of being awake, the middle 6 hours of being awake, then the final 6 hours of being awake. You would want to have a third of your calories and protein in the first 6 hours, the first third of the day. You want to have your second thirds of calories and protein in the middle third of the day. Then the final 1/3 of your calories and protein in the final 1/3 of the day. So it makes a little bit of sense. So you might find out, okay, I need 800 calories per 6 hours. Well, if I'm having one meal, that better be an 800 calorie meal. If I'm having a meal and a small snack, maybe it ends up being 200 calories for a snack, then a 600 calorie meal. And you just kind of judge that as you go through the day. So that way before dinner, before the end of the day, you can say, okay, where am I at in calories? Where am I at in protein? Can I adjust my dinner to make sure I'm on track? So it's very helpful to know what's going on after you've eaten something, so that way you can adjust for the rest of the day to make sure you still hit your ranges. If I haven't eaten the food yet, I'm going to ask myself, how much of this do I need, depending on my calorie target, depending on my protein target, and depending on my sugar allowance. So I'll say, okay, if I'm about to eat this, I know I need 600 calories. I want at least 30 grams of protein. What do I have to eat? How much of this do I have to eat to get 30 grams of protein? How much of this do I have to eat to get to 600 calories? So I will ask myself, okay, based on the labels, if I'm not using the app, how much of this do I need to reach my calorie, protein, and sugars? You might find that one thing gets you a lot of protein, but you're like, God, I'm not eating 600 calories worth of that. I'm going to eat what I need to get my 30 grams of protein. Then I'll pair something else with it. So chicken and rice. You eat enough chicken to get your protein, then you eat rice to make up the rest of the calories. That kind of stuff. Then I'll look at something and say, okay, is it carb dense or is it fat dense? And then which would be better given my current activities. If I'm sitting at my computer and I'm planning on sitting at my computer for the next couple hours, more of a fat-based meal would probably be better because it digests slower. I have a slow need for energy right now, so I want to have a slow release of energy from the meal. If I'm active and I have a high demand of energy right now, I want a high release of energy from my food, so I'm going to focus more on carbohydrates. And then, depending on the individual, I would ask, do I care about cholesterol, sodium, or fiber? Am I trying to hit a certain number of fibers, like a certain amount of fiber per day? If so, is this going to give me, enough I need? If I have a certain limit for sodium or a certain limit for cholesterol, is this going to allow me to stay under my limit? And then as for vitamins and minerals, like I said, I don't track them, and I don't have most of my clients track any of that stuff. It's just take a multivitamin, and you're probably pretty good to go. Since I eat over 3,000 calories a day, when I'm eating that amount, I actually only take about half the serving size of the daily vitamins and minerals because I eat so much food. I'm going to be covering the remaining needs likely through the whole foods. If I'm any kind of like caloric deficit or any kind of cutting phase, fat loss phase, I'll take the full dose since I am going to be limited in my food intake. But that's essentially what we use them for. If you do want to learn how to read nutrition fact labels, we're basically looking at it to say, okay, how much of this gives me how many calories, how much protein, how much sugar, and that way I can understand how to figure out those numbers. And then, is it carb dense? Is it fat dense? And which do I need right now, depending on what I'm doing? And then any specific needs. So if you have cholesterol concerns, make sure you're looking at the cholesterol and nutrition fact labels. Make sure it's not high in cholesterol. If it is, switch to a different food item. But that's it. I mean, I'm assuming that this is relatively straightforward. It might be a little bit odd to know that there's so much on that label that really we don't care about. But it's really highly individually dependent. And it also depends on your definition of healthy. I've had clients before that want to get all their vitamins and minerals from Whole Foods. They don't want any supplements whatsoever. And I'm like, okay, we can do it. I'm going to tell you how to do it. But good God, it's a lot of work. Some of the people who tend to lean towards that are vegans and vegetarians, and it'll be challenging for them to get in very specific types of foods throughout the day to cover all of their needs. So that's why I do like to have a supplement for it, because it just makes it easier. You get a chance to then eat foods that are more convenient, more palatable, and just foods you like, rather than having to eat a certain food to cross off a certain need whenever that's not going to be long-term sustainable because maybe you just don't even like the food and it's very expensive and it's annoying to prep. So we want to make it as easy as it can be so that we can be as consistent as possible. So I hope this was helpful. If you have any questions, you can always go to our website, www.brittlirongym.com. On the bottom of the homepage is a contact form. You can send me any questions you have. I'll always answer any emails. Right now, I am answering all listener emails within 2 weeks. So give me a little bit of grace time if you send me a message. I will get back to you within 2 weeks for sure. I don't have anybody that I think I'm behind on. So if it's been more than 2 weeks and you haven't heard from me, please let me know. I might have missed your email in some way. But please reach out if you need anything, if you have any questions. Also, while you're on the website, check out the services we have. We do have nutrition coaching, also coaching that involves training and nutrition combined. And then for anybody interested, any trainer interested, I do work with trainers. Over half my clients are personal trainers, and I do teach how to do nutrition coaching. So if you're interested in that, let me know, and I'll happily set you up with that program, and we can kind of go through that. Awesome. If you need anything, just let me know. If you like the podcast, please share the podcast. The more people we share it with, the more people we can help. If you like the podcast, please consider donating to support the podcast, which you can do on our website. And if you like the information we share in the podcast, you can find more from us on our social media channels. You can find us and follow us on Instagram and YouTube under the name Brittle Iron Gym. As always, I hope this was helpful, and thank you for listening.